all the energy you have left. Let her hear it, Lichelli, everybody!
So, up until I was 11, I had never really suffered from racial prejudice, as my English mother had sent my sister and I to a Catholic school where all the nuns hated all the children equally. So we never suffered from discrimination. But when I was 11, I was transferred to the local school, which was just up the street from our house. And the only way to get there was to pass a convenience store that was perpendicular to the local council estate, which is the equivalent of Section 8 housing. So on my first day of school, I arrived at the store, and there were 3 16-year-old girls outside smoking. And the second they saw me, the smallest of the 3 kind of elbowed her friends and was like, "Watch this." And they started following me up the street saying, "Ugh, what's that smell? Smells like poo, it's the packy, ugh." And they did this the whole way up the block until I got to the school gates, at which they let me go, and they were just left to their raucous laughter. And this became my life for the first 2 weeks at this school. Every day they would be waiting for me. Every day they would follow me up the block, hurling these racial insults. And every day I would just pray that I could get through the school gates without bursting into tears and having them see me. And the worst part was that other children would join in too. And the worst part was the boys would join in. And I had no one to talk to about it because my sister, who was biracial too, was 9, and I didn't want to scare her. And my English mother, who was a teacher, had taught me at the very first time that I'd experienced racism when I was 5. She had said that racist people are ignorant and, you shouldn't be hurt by their words because they're just stupid. And so I couldn't go to her now and tell her that I was upset because she'd think that I was weak. Because she had played me James Brown records and taught me that I was black and proud. But the problem was that the only examples that we had of black people were from these American sitcoms that we'd seen, like Different Strokes and the A-Team. So it was a little bit hard to understand what that meant. But now, after 2 weeks, I just couldn't hold it in anymore. And at Sunday lunch, I burst into floods of tears and I had to tell my mother everything. And she was obviously very upset that I'd kept this a secret from her. And then after she'd comforted me, she sat me down and she said, "Well, darling, are you the colour of poo?" And I said, "Oh, no." And she's like, "And do you smell like poo?" And I was like, "No." She said, "Well, you tell those girls that. You tell them your real name." So that night I couldn't sleep at all because I kept dreaming about what was going to happen when I confronted the bullies the next morning, and I kept thinking worst case scenarios, like what if they jumped me and I was hospitalized. But none of that was nearly as bad as that look of disappointment that my mother would give me if I didn't stand up to them. So the next morning I arrived at the store and there they were waiting for me, and I crossed the street and the leader started following me. "All right there, half-caste, what you doing, half-caste?" And started following me up the street, and I could see the gates in front of me, and I knew this is it. I have to do it now, and my time was running out. But I was so scared. And then she said, "Oi, do you understand English, Packy?" And that was it. I turned, and the move was so abrupt that I almost scared myself. And I was looking at this girl straight in the face, and I was just taken aback by how ordinary she was. She had this very translucent skin and pimples that she tried to cover up with this beige foundation that didn't match, and her hair was this peroxide and burnt, and she looked cheap and slutty. And it took a minute, and then it felt like a minute, and then these words came out of me that were strong and powerful, like my mother's, and I was like, "I am not the colour of poo, and I do not smell like poo. My name is Lichelli, Shelley for short, and from now on I wish you to call me by my proper name." And I didn't wait for a response, I just turned on my heels and quickly hurried up the road. But I actually don't think the girls even moved, they just stayed there, frozen. And I made it into the school gates. And for the first time in 2 weeks, I was so happy, and I knew my mother would be so proud of me. But then I realised that I was actually going to have to face them again the next morning. So, next morning I get to the store, but the girls aren't there. So great, I get into school without any problem. The second day, they're not there again. By the third day, I started, I've built up so much courage. They actually glanced into the store to see if they were there, and they weren't inside. But by the fourth day, they were back. And as I approached the store, I saw one of the friends kind of elbow the leader and was like, "Here comes the half-caste now." And I braced for it, but then something miraculous happened. She turned to her friend and said, "Leave her alone, that's Lichelli, she's all right." And they just let me walk up to the gate without any hassle. After that, a couple of days later, I ran into them at school, and I saw them coming towards me down the corridor, and I thought, this is it, now they're going to body slam me into a locker. But she just nodded at me. And then a few days later, she introduced herself. Her name was Tracy. And never again did Tracy or her friends bully me. We actually went on to have this kind of strange friendship after that. We'd occasionally stop and talk about the weather and how school sucked. And, and it was great. And I have to thank my mother, for giving me the courage in her rather strange way to stand up for myself. But I have to tell her that I will never quite understand what James Brown meant when he said, he's black and he's proud. But I guess the lesson here was I just had to learn to be proud of being me. Thank you.
Keep it going for Lichelli, our last